Welcome to episode 312 of CppCast, the first podcast for C++ developers by C++ developers. I'm your host, Rob Irving, joined by my co-host, Jason Turner. Jason, welcome back.
Hey, thanks, Rob. Yeah, I heard Matt said that he tried to do his best impression of me or something like that.
It was great having him on the show. It's been a while since we've talked to him on CppCast, at least.
Right.
Yeah,
I didn't go back and listen to the episode, so I hope it did go well.
It did. It did go very well. I do want to make a public apology to our guest we had on last week, Dennis, because I didn't realize that we'd had him on before. I didn't realize until I was editing the show putting together the show notes that we had him on like 2 years ago. I completely forgot. I didn't recognize his face. He had grown a beard since we last had him on, so I was blaming that. But
blame the beard. People always blame the beard.
Yeah. So yeah, if anyone was wondering if he sounded familiar, he was a returning guest. It was great having him on.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, at the top of every episode, I like to read a piece of feedback. We got this tweet from David Faconti, and he says, "When I go to the gym, I often listen to the latest CppCast episodes. You may learn a lot of interesting things about the C++ community." And yeah, thanks for listening to us at the gym. I haven't been going back to the gym yet. How about you, Jason? Are you doing anything like that yet?
Back in 2019, when we were really like traveling all the time, we canceled our gym membership and invested in some
home gym
here at home, which was just absolutely perfect timing, because otherwise we would have had to have fought the rest of the planet for, hunks of steel.
Yeah,
that
was hard to do for a while. I think I have some other friends who did the same thing early on in the pandemic.
Yeah, I bought like one piece of equipment during the middle of all that, and it was no problem, but like it's an adjustable kettlebell, but any of the like add-on weights are, I think, still unavailable from the same company. And that's that's crazy.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we'd love to hear your thoughts about the show. You can always reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, or email us at feedback@cppcast.com. And don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes or subscribe on YouTube. So it's been a while since you and I have been together, so we decided to just do a news episode today, which we haven't done, I think, in a very long time.
I think it's necessary from time to time. People say they like it.
Yeah, people always say they like them, and we were able to find plenty of stuff to talk about.
Well, so on the note of stuff to talk about, there was a little bit of effort last week when I was gone to try to get you to talk about yourself, but you just said no.
For listeners who are curious, like I work on a geospatial mapping application for my day job. I always feel like I don't have that much like novel and interesting things.
Rob, we've learned that everyone has something different and interesting to talk about.
I also, do a fair amount of my day job work in C# land too. I kind of go back and forth between C++ and C# a lot.
But pretty much most of your career has been in mapping in some way, right?
Yeah. Before my current job, which is working on an app for DoD, I used to work on a GPS navigation app called Copilot.
Which some of our listeners might know.
Yeah.
Does Copilot still exist as an Android app, or did it just kind of get pushed out by?
I believe it still does.
Okay.
When I was working there, it was always getting pretty stiff competition from just the built-in apps you can get, like Google Maps and Apple Maps. But yeah, it's still an option there.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, let's start with talking about a couple things you have coming up, Jason. You want to share these?
Yeah, this is my shameless self-promotion segment of the hour here, I guess. So we've kind of talked around this a little bit, but I have been asked to keynote at Indie Tech Town, and that's coming up in Norway. And you know what? I actually have to double check what the dates are, because if things return to normal travel-wise by the end of the year, I'm going to actually end up with a pretty busy schedule. Okay. So that is the 18th through the 21st of October. And that's in Kongsberg, Norway. And so let's see, the title of my keynote is Garbage In, Pearls Out.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to talk about any kind of novel idea. It's just experience that I had on a really fun project that I worked on a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought it would make a good story for a keynote and maybe get some people thinking in a different way a little bit. But at the moment, Norway has not opened up to tourists at all. So I don't even know if I'm going to be allowed to go to Norway. We'll see. But then I'm
you
also
said it's October?
October 18th through the 21st. Yeah, that's what I have on my calendar. I hope it's the right days.
Okay. What does NDC Tech Town do if you can't travel? Like, are you going to do a remote
I
keynote,
told
or do
them
they
that
just
I
find
will
someone
do.
else?
Yeah, I told them that I will be willing to do the keynote remote if they want me to.
Okay.
But I'm also supposed to offer a 2-day workshop there, and I said that as we've talked about on the show, not interested in doing a 2-day remote workshop, particularly with an 8-hour time difference between me and the students.
Yeah, that would be rough.
They are.
Yeah.
And that's practical performance practices, which I gave a talk called Practical Performance Practices at C++ Now,
Mm-hmm.
2016, 17,
Okay.
something like that. It was a really popular talk. People liked it. I had a lot of fun with it. And I thought, this seems like something that I could make into a 2-day class where I distill down the lessons that I've learned into practical application for your code. But it's basically the intersection of where best practices meet performance concerns.
Okay.
And I think that should be a good one. It's going to be new material. So if you've been to any of my other classes or whatever. And then the next week is CppCon.
Right.
Like back literally the next week. Yeah, I've got 3 days to get home and back on the right time zone.
Uh-huh.
And then, 2 days to get home and back on the right time zone. And then do a pre-conference practical performance practices at CppCon here in Colorado.
And that'll be Saturday the 23rd and Sunday the 24th of October.
Yeah, right. Yes. So if I fly back Thursday night, get home Friday, and then teach on Saturday and Sunday is the plan. It's like all the things that I thought made 2019, exhausting and said I wouldn't do again, I volunteered to do again for 2021.
I hope you're able to get over the jet lag on that Friday.
It's why they serve coffee at conference classes.
Do you know if you have a regular talk in the schedule for CppCon? I know
I submitted a talk. It hasn't been accepted one way or the other yet.
They haven't put out that notification yet. Okay.
Not as far as I know. Maybe it was an email that came while I was on vacation last week and I didn't notice.
Okay. Well, speaking of that does bring us to our next article here is blog post from John Kolb. Big update with big thanks for a big program. And obviously this is about CppCon. And yeah, their program committee is hard at work reviewing and rating all the submissions they've had. John says here that they received over 200 submissions, which I think is a record for them. Yeah. Or near record number of submissions. Yeah.
Oh, near record.
Yeah. And he does also mention that the quality of the submissions were extremely high, and that the number of submissions they're going to have to turn away that are still of very high quality will be very large.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe I didn't get accepted for a CppCon talk at that rate, but
well, you'll find out either way soon, I believe, right? Yeah,
presumably. The early bird tickets have already expired, although I know I've been accepted for a class, so I don't have to worry about that. I'll be allowed to go to the conference anyhow, but yeah.
Right. And it also does say here that most of the submissions, I think you can choose between whether you want to do online or on site, and most of the submissions were on site.
Yeah, it was interesting. So when you submitted it, I think your options were on site only, online only, or either.
Okay.
And then they just sent an email out 10 days ago asking everyone who had submitted if you could give a 1 to 10 scale of how likely you are to actually be able to come on site. So they can try to figure that out. But yeah, that's going to be different to this mixed environment.
Yeah, especially with it'll be interesting to see how it goes, because obviously, as we were talking right before the show started, we were thinking everything might have been over like a month ago, and now things are ramping up again, it seems.
On the upside, I've seen some statistics. Granted, it was like 3 weeks ago, so I don't know if these have held true. That it seemed that the Delta variant, which is spreading so easily and so quickly, seems to be burning itself out relatively quickly. Like where it first hit hard in England, and only like 6 weeks or something like that, it was basically gone because it had moved through so fast. But
okay, well, that's good. That's good news.
Yeah. On that note, get vaccinated if you can.
If you're able to get the vaccine, you definitely should. We both have it. We're fine.
Neither one of us has turned into a zombie yet. You haven't. Has your DNA been reconfigured? Have you grown a third arm?
No, I haven't grown a third arm. I'm pretty sure I don't have a tracking chip from Bill Gates, Microsoft in me.
Probably not. Yeah.
They're tracking me through my phone, but that's not Microsoft. That'd be Google and Android and Samsung, I guess. Yeah.
I'm being tracked. I even own a Google phone. I can't believe I did that, but it was the best option.
Yeah. Okay. So this next one is an article you found, and it's from Bishop Fox Labs, and it's "You're doing IoT RNG/wrong."
Yeah, so a friend of mine, and I think I've mentioned him on the side before, does security. His career has intersected with security in some way for like always. So he sees these articles and then ships them my way sometimes. And I love it. And some of these things.
Yeah, it was a very long article. I certainly learned some things that I didn't really know about random number generation. It basically focuses on how if you're writing like embedded software on IoT devices and you need to get a random number, you have this API to call directly to the hardware random number generator. And the article goes into lots of detail into why this doesn't always work very well. You can wind up getting just a zero back, which is not very random. The author of the article is suggesting that all these IoT devices should really have the same type of random number generator that an actual operating system has, where it's gathering randomness from multiple different sources, not just the hardware, right?
Yeah. And seeding, like using real entropy to seed a pseudo random number generator so that you always have a cryptographically random number available to you, like you dev random on Linux, I guess.
Right.
Will always return something from its pool of entropy or pseudo random number.
Yeah, it's definitely wild that you could ask for a random number and just get nothing, or get zero, or an uninitialized chunk of memory for your random number. Like that is pretty wild. But as the author points out, there is a return code to these methods, and you should check it. And apparently no one does. Like
no one does.
They scoured GitHub for all these examples where people are calling into these IoT hardware random number generators, and showed all these examples of people not checking the return code.
Yeah, it seems like I'm not being a security person myself, but kind of going with what Linux allows, that if you just if you try to get the random number back from your hardware and you do get an error code, because part of the problem is they're like, well, if we get an error code, what do? We can't just crash now. We have to do something. But a part of the problem, like you said, is the API. You're passing in a pointer to where you want the random number to go, and you get back an error code. And if no one checks the error code, if you passed uninitialized memory in, you're going to get uninitialized memory back. If you pass a zero in, you're going to zero back, or sometimes it'll just fill it with zero. But if they did something like keep the last actual
random
number value and use that to seed a cryptographically pseudo-random number generator, then they would at least have something available that's not to 0 or uninitialized memory.
Yeah, I guess getting some repeating values would probably be better than getting 0 or getting uninitialized garbage.
Well, you wouldn't even get repeating values, though, if you reseeded your...
Oh, true. Okay.
Or if you just seeded it with actual entropy at the start. I don't know. Anyhow, something to be aware of.
Yeah, definitely something to be aware of. And I think the author also kind of indicated that this problem should get solved, or I guess they're just pointing to their solution. I don't know.
So check your return codes, everyone.
Well, that's one. Although they do point out, if you do check your return code, maybe the best thing you can do is just spin loop until you eventually get a random number, but that's not really a great solution either.
Yeah, it comes down to like, what are the sources of entropy that your embedded CPU has, and how often can it fill its entropy buffer? All that just sounds like I'm making stuff up.
Yeah.
Fun fact, a random number generator on a Commodore 64 can be had by... So there is an actual A to D converter. There's a couple of them on the Commodore 64, which was for the paddle interface.
Okay.
So if you didn't have a paddle plugged in there and you try to read from the A to D converter, you're going to get random noise. You're going to get what is the value that the current just happens to be floating at the moment. So that old hardware actually, in some ways, had like a better source of entropy than some of the newer things.
These IoT devices. Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Next thing we have is a C++ ISO paper. And this one is remove no discard annotations from the standard library specification. And I know I saw a couple of people linking to this on Twitter
there was some
last week.
Yeah.
Some people who seemed to be very upset about this suggestion. What was your take on it, Jason?
Well, I had read this on Twitter while I was on vacation. And then my friend sent me this article, the article we just discussed, and I'm reading through it and I'm going, well, if these entropy functions were marked no discard, then at least the developers would be getting warnings everywhere saying that they're ignoring the error code back.
Yeah.
I don't think to me, it doesn't on the surface sound like it's a good idea to tear out all of the no discard requirements from the standard. Yeah,
I mean, I don't understand why you would want to undo that work. I don't know. These arguments don't really seem all that compelling to me, but I'm not in the committee, so I don't know.
It seems to come down to, does it make sense for the committee to spend time reviewing every single function to see if it should have no discard on it, and how much industry experience does it take to know whether or not that function should have no discard on it?
Right.
But I mean, I think some of these things, I've never seen, let's say, a const member function, and something that is clearly just a getter, right?
Right.
That returns a value.
Why would you ever no discard that? Or why would you ever discard that? Right.
Why would you ever discard that? Like, there's, I think, some cases where you can say this 100% rule.
Yeah.
That this should be applied no discard. And that's where a lot of the interesting bugs are, like empty versus clear.
And how much committee time does it really take to evaluate what you're talking about there? Like, yeah, it's just a getter. Why would you discard this? Let's put no discard there. I don't know.
I don't know either.
And also he's also, this paper author is talking about taking out the work that's already done.
Yeah, right? Tear it all, which I can see as an argument for consistency. Like, if you're going to say we're going all in or not. But yeah. Like, they want to remove no discard from new, like the paper shows all the places where it would be removed from. New and allocate and empty. And these things, like empty really, really needs no discard. We've talked about that, I think, with with STL about the STL, right?
I think so. Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see if this paper does go anywhere. I mean, like I said, there was definitely a lot of Twitter backlash that we saw to it going out there. So maybe most of the committee members will vote this down, but I guess we have to wait and see.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm just scrolling through all the things that would be removed. Oh, look, they added no discard to the result of calling async, which returns a future. It does seem like that should be no discard. Anyhow.
Yeah, seems that way to me. Okay, so this next one is a bug report on Visual Studio for the Visual C++ compiler. Do you want to tell me about this one, Jason?
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess it is a bug report, but it's someone complaining that standard span is not zero cost because of Microsoft's calling conventions. And it's something like I had never stopped to think about before. Like I spend so much time on Compiler Explorer looking at the Itanium ABI, the 64-bit calling conventions that Linux and Mac OS use. But since span, apparently, Microsoft's calling conventions will never split a struct across two registers when passing it to a function. So even span, which is simply two 64-bit numbers, is never going to be passed as two 64-bit registers, which it would definitely be two 64-bit registers on Itanium calling conventions. They have to set up stack space to store span if you're going to pass it to a function, and then pass a pointer to that on the stack to the function or as a register or whatever. So it has to like actually marshal these things around instead of just making it a simple, clean copy. It's not really specific to span. It's any small struct that you would expect would be free to pass as not.
Right. And this is something that worked differently on x86. On x86, it could go just directly to the register.
Oh, is that right? I missed that part. If that's the...
It looks that way because there's Compiler Explorer links here for 64-bit and 32-bit. And on the 32-bit, the code is a lot more simple, the generated code.
Right.
So I take it there's probably not much they can do here, though, without changing the 64-bit calling convention.
Talk about an ABI break.
Yeah.
That's probably undoable. But there's a comment here. There's apparently something like vector call or some sort of pragma that could possibly be used to say, no, why didn't you just, like specially flag this particular type so it gets passed in a different way, which might theoretically be an option. I don't know. Something to think about, though, just in general, our assumptions. And I've been playing a lot with, like doing more Commodore 64 work with C++. And right. Your assumptions, like the general rule of thumb is like, if a struct is the size of 2 pointers or smaller, you should always pass it by copy. Like that's something that, people may have said in like performance conference talk or something. And that works great on like 64-bit Linux calling conventions. But on my Commodore 64 stuff where a pointer is 16 bits, but the largest register is 8 bits, passing a 32-bit struct by value is actually considerably more expensive than passing it by reference in this weird tiny world that I'm working in. And it's just making me like in stuff like this reconsider like what are the assumptions that I make when I say, oh, this is always a good idea or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's a good thing we do have these tools like Compiler Explorer so that we can quickly evaluate these things.
Hey. Go support Compiler Explorer on Patreon if you aren't right now.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we also have a couple Reddit posts here that you put in. This first one is, does anyone ever use Goto in their code? And Yeah, we have a lot of responders here just talking about like, no, why would you ever use Goto?
The answer is no.
Yeah. The only one that sounded like a semi-legitimate use is if you're in like a nested loop and you want to jump out of both loops at the same time. Were there any other ones you saw as a kind of somewhat legitimate use of Goto?
I think that's the only one that stood out to me. Pretty much everyone else was like, hey, you should just be using RAII, which is an interesting conversation here because there's a bunch of people that are like, basically, what is RAII and how can that help me? Mm-hmm. And other people explaining how you can, write a utility class that can do your cleanup on function exit or whatever. And that's where a lot of people say they would use Goto, is to like jump to the end of the function and do cleanup or something like that. Although, this nested loop thing, this issue, I haven't had that question come up in a while because I just keep reorganizing my code so that if I've got like multiple layers of nested loops and I really need to escape from it early, I put that into a function and return.
Okay.
Then the compiler is going to handle all of that for me.
Yeah, that's certainly a lot cleaner than using a Goto.
Yeah, or an immediately invoked lambda or something like that. But out of curiosity, does C# have Gotos?
I don't think so.
So you don't
certainly never used one in C#.
Have you ever used one in C++?
Yeah, it's been a while. I certainly haven't used it in a long time, but I'm sure I have.
I honestly don't think I've ever written code with a Goto in it since leaving BASIC.
That's interesting.
Now I feel like I have to just to like
go write something with a Goto just to say you have.
Well, I've actually been intending to make an episode on safely using Goto because you actually can safely use Goto almost anywhere in C++ because the compiler will stop you if it's a scenario where you can't.
Oh, what are the areas where you can't use a Goto?
You can't jump to after a variable, like you can't skip the initialization of a variable.
Okay.
And that comes up inside a switch statement. Like if you have a variable declared in a previous label of a switch block and then try to use it in the next one down, you get the same exact error.
Okay.
So a situation like that, you can't jump across function calls. The compiler won't let you, stuff like that.
That makes sense.
Not that I recommend doing it.
No. Okay. Next thing we have here. This is GitHub Actions to set up GCC, Clang, and Mingw. Just looks like kind of a helpful utility, right, Jason?
Yeah. I just feel like this is something our listeners would want to know about.
Yeah, so we'll definitely put the link into the show notes. But yeah, if you're using GitHub Actions, this could be just a good resource to get yourself like bootstrapped. Yeah,
it's like, I need GCC 11, and it's like a single statement call to use this action to pull in GCC 11 into your GitHub action. That seems pretty handy.
Yeah, definitely. And then next one we have, am I going to be burned at the stake for using basic string of int as an integer array? It's funny that you can do this. The author points out how handy it is to use basic string of int as opposed to like a vector of int because of optimization, short string optimization, things like that.
I have no problem with this, honestly.
Would you actually use this like in real code though, or just to play around with?
If I could prove that there was a good reason to do it, then I would. Like if I knew that in the 99% case, I need a vector of like 2 ints, which would fall into short string optimization, but sometimes it grows bigger than that. Oh yeah, I would be totally cool with doing a basic string of ints in that case. Because I mean, and there's one guy that comments in here that's basically like, well, this is surely less efficient than using vector. Well, it almost certainly isn't, because our string classes have been optimized to the ends of the earth.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It's funny.
There is a video here from Brian Ruth, which was one of my very first students. He was in the first best practices class that I ever taught, which was at CppCon. It was the last year CppCon was in, no, when was that? It was like 4 years ago, something like that. Anyhow, so
did we talk to him about this talk?
I think we did.
Yeah, this seems familiar.
Yeah. So I was teaching the students like know your standard containers.
Right.
And your list of standard containers that everyone's aware of is deck, list, map, set, multi-map, multi-set, all these things, vector, array. No one stops and thinks basic string is one of the standard containers. So I mentioned that, and my student Brian was like, well, wait, can I do like a basic string of int? And we all just like stopped for a minute and we're like, wait, yeah, does that make sense? Sometimes it might make sense, yeah.
Okay.
Just don't be aware that basic string requires the type to be trivial. If it's not trivial, things go bad quickly.
Does the compiler let you do that?
Everyone except for libc++. No, sorry. libc++ has a static assertion that stops you from putting a non-trivial type in there.
Okay.
The other two do not have a static assertion for that, and you can get yourself in trouble.
Good to know. Good to know. All right. Next thing we have got an update from JetBrains. This is ReSharper C++ 2021.2. A bunch of new things they're adding here. Type conversion hints, immutability inspections, inline functions. So yeah, one of the things that I thought was really nice is you can now get a little light bulb suggesting you add const, which is based on the constant and immutability section of the C++ core guidelines. Seems really nice.
Yeah, and just for the record, it took me a minute. I thought that I was reading updates about CLion, and they're like, wait, this is ReSharper.
No, I mean, they probably have the same engine under the covers.
They do have different gens, actually.
Do they? Okay.
Yeah. Anyhow.
Interesting. And yeah, same thing. If you have like a const int, you could make that const expert with a nice little light bulb. So yeah, good stuff.
The one that really like jumped out at me here was the you can create idiomatic bodies of operator functions. So you can do like operator plus and then just click on it and say generate this for me, and it will like plus all of the members together. That was nice. Right after the section that you linked to. I'm like, wait a minute. That could have saved me some effort.
Yeah, that's really nice. And there's also some stuff here about Unreal Engine. They just had a big release, Unreal Engine 5. And if you're using that, ReSharper C++ will have better support for everything new in Unreal Engine, I guess.
Do you use ReSharper in your C# stuff?
Yeah, I use it for both.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very nice.
So do you do C++ and C# at work?
Yeah.
And interact with each other?
Yes. Yeah.
So tell us more about it.
I mean, still use C++ CLI, which I know some people probably cringe at, but that's kind of the way I go from C++ to using C#.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Are you able to use like the latest and greatest version of C++ in your work?
I think we're on 2014 right now. So not latest and greatest, but we're pretty up to date.
What version of Visual Studio?
2019. Oh,
so you could theoretically.
Yes, but we target other platforms, including Android, where we're using a kind of older version of the NDK. That limits us a bit. Yeah.
If only you didn't have all these dependencies. Would breaking ABI break your stuff?
No, because we recompile everything all the time. I don't think that's an issue for us.
One more vote for breaking ABI then.
Definitely. Okay, and then the last thing I have is a post on the Visual C++ blog, and this is moving a project to C++ named modules. And the author just goes through the exercise of first creating a video game, first using just normal, including header files to build it.
Did you notice
And
they're
then,
using Pixel Game Engine?
yeah, they're using Pixel Game Engine, which we had the author of that on the show not too long ago.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's all good. And after creating the game and writing all the code for it, he then goes about updating to use modules instead of include headers. And it's a small project, but he writes through what kind of steps you need to go through. It all seemed pretty straightforward. And the ending, he writes the comparison of compile speed, and it was 23x.
Wow.
It's a small project, but that's very significant. It went from 3.5 seconds to 0.15 seconds to compile a project. It's very nice.
Wow.
Yeah. I wonder how much that would hold as you scale into something bigger.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to be honest, because, and this article mentions at the top of it, like how tooling is still a problem and whatever, but they are using CMake. Yep. So that's something to consider. But for modules and for coroutines both, I kind of feel like I'm still waiting for other people to use them first, and then I'll start using them.
Yeah, I mean, as nice as this is, I'd really like to see, has anyone gone through this for their production application?
Right.
How long did that take for, something that's millions of lines of code?
Haven't the Microsoft people told us that they are using internally for Office or something now?
I feel like we may have heard that. I don't know if they've done a complete conversion. I don't know.
Right. Well, you should do it and then report back to us. You just said you're using Visual Studio 2019, so
yeah. I don't know if I have the bandwidth to go about that on my own. Yeah.
How long do your projects take to compile? Are you caught with these problems?
I'm not, waiting for hours for it to compile. I mean,
okay.
It's just a few minutes.
Just long enough to do a quick jousting match in the hallway.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it would certainly be nice to make it faster, but I'm not hurting too badly. How about you?
It depends on the projects. One of them, a clean build, is on the order of something like 10 minutes, and the other one, a clean build, is maybe more like 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's on my 12-core Ryzen now with NVMe, so I've tried to kind of optimize the build process as much as I can. It certainly takes time, but how often do you need to do a full clean build? It turns out, because of the way my clients, the kind of things that they ask me to do, means that I am often hitting the top level headers. So okay. I am probably the one most impacted by build times, because I had touched the top level header 10 times trying to refactor some code and have to wait for the whole project to rebuild again.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that's it for today, right, Jason?
That's all I've got. I feel like I talked about myself enough. Is there anything else you want to say about yourself?
Well, since you were asking about, my day job stuff, I should say we did start using CMake and Conan, which has been quite nice.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, I'm still spending most of my time in Visual Studio, but we're using CMake to generate those Visual Studio projects, and then using the C++ Visual Studio projects that come from CMake. But I've certainly, liked making that switch. I certainly like being able to pull everything down from Conan. We used to have just a bunch of zips checked into Git, which was not ideal at all. No. So Conan is certainly preferable than that.
Are you using a privately hosted Conan repository or something?
Yeah. We have an Artifactory instance that we put both Conan packages and NuGet packages on.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's actually pretty nice. I think that's run by JFrog Artifactory, as they have like an enterprise, support that you can get.
Neat.
Yeah.
So, is this the first project you've worked on that actually used Conan to generate your Visual Studio project files? I mean, excuse me, CMake to generate your Visual Studio project files?
It's certainly the first thing I've worked on where I'm actually like interacting with CMake. I may have worked on some things where, some libraries being built with CMake, but I'm not really paying attention to it. It's already set up, kind of happening under the covers.
Okay. So I'm like old and set in my ways. So
Okay.
my workflow is still to do the checkout, then manually run CMake, then open the Visual Studio project. And I just can't convince myself to tell Visual Studio to open the CMake project directly. And I don't know why I can't convince myself to do that.
So what I wound up doing is because, like I said, I have a mix of C# and C++ projects all in one solution.
Right.
And I want to keep working that way. I know that Visual Studio has, really good CMake support, but that's kind of if you're only using CMake.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've done is if you check out the repository from scratch without running CMake, you'll open up the solution and it will tell you like, hey, I can't find this project. It doesn't exist yet.
Okay.
So I created a project which just runs the CMake scripts for me.
Interesting.
And I build that, and then I get all my projects created and populated, and I just need to refresh it, and then I'm good.
And that's kind of a failure of CMake because it doesn't have first level support for C#.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we could have CMake make all those projects, we could fully switch over to CMake.
I have done that, but it was very ugly. I started with a Visual Studio project template and then populated the things that I needed it to. But that was because I was generating C# bindings from C++ with Swig.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I just needed just this tiny little test harness or whatever in C# or just to compile the CS files that Swig had generated. So I could script the generation of that stuff and then call Visual Studio to make that build for me. The only other mixed language project I've done is Fortran, and Fortran has full support in CMake. Fortran and C++ can go together in CMake.
Right. Okay. Well, it was great having you back from your trip, Jason. And we'll have a regular guest next week to talk to.
And we managed to get you to talk about your projects a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know why everyone's always asking for me to talk more about my stuff. I don't know.
You're like the I don't know, the figure in the background. You're not the figure in the background. You're the host, but you're somehow mysterious. I guess
I guess so. Okay. Well, it was great catching up. Great going over all this, and like I said, we'll be back with a normal episode next week.
All right. Cool.
Thanks, everyone.